talking about the sine wave, and this is something that, I mean, I've been watching Jack's systems evolve over time. He's been adding pieces to it, digging deeper into the understandings of these things. So, I mean, the earliest thing I remember learning and applying right away in the 90s was the 45-degree contact point, you know, right. And in the 2000s kind of came the 8 board got developed a little bit more, and that, you know, I already told my story about that. In recent years, I've become aware of the sine wave, and that's taken a little bit more time to kind of put together in my mind. It took more practice for me to actually get the benefit of it. But now all of a sudden, now I'm finding that my strings work better for me because the energy going out my arm is going onto my string. One of the pain points here is that if you're not using the sine wave principle, that you're gonna rely on your equipment too much. You're gonna feel like you have to swing faster, and you're gonna feel like you have to string your racket tighter, and a lot of different things that will actually have negative outcomes. But now that I'm using the sine wave, what I'm finding is I can use a softer racket that's more heavily weighted. My racket right now is way over 12 ounces, and I have it strung with gut, and it's not particularly tight. So, all right, so Jack, after all that, why is it that, what are the pain points of not using the sine wave besides what I've just described?
Well, once again, you can hurt yourself if you think that the stroke goes through the ball, right? Through another tip, hit through the ball, which means nothing really, because once the ball contacts with your strings, it's gone. So there's no way you can literally grab it and hit through it. It's an idiom, people say it. And so what happens is people come from the outside and they make contact on their way in. But if you watch the great players like Djokovic and Federer and Nadal, they actually make contact as they ripple away from their body. So they get the most amount of leverage and the most stability because they're coming from this curve, this concave curve, right? In the forehand at the 45, I move my hips in a figure 8, which creates a larger figure 8 in my arm, or a sine wave. And then it goes from small. See, as I turn, you can see the arm gets closer to me. And then as I come around the corner, with my hips, it goes from concave and it widens out, and it goes from small at the 45 to big at the 45. And so you absorb the hit better because you're literally at the point of contact, you're transitioning from concave to convex, and you're going away from you for the leverage. So the racket is stable and it doesn't wobble. When you hit it straight on, or come behind it or come from the outside of it, the racket head wobbles. And that can really hurt your arm and hurt your stroke as well. So
yeah, you know what this makes me want to do? I want to go back and look at some old videos of some of the great players through time. But if we want to talk about the evolution of the game, I think Yvonne Lendl was the first one who really came from the inside to go out, and then, you know, his forehand was mind-numbingly effective. There was Yvonne Lendl's forehand, and there was every other player on tour, right? And then Pete Sampras sort of adopted, you know, he went and spent some time with Yvonne, and Yvonne said, hey kid, let me show you how to do that. And so then the Pete Sampras forehand became the thing, right? And now you've got, you know, even though Federer has slipped, his forehand is still one of the iconic shots, and he took that thing to a completely new, refined level. In fact, there's this great video that you can see on YouTube called Roger Federer A-Pass, A-P-A-S. So go on YouTube, take a look at that, and that will also outline, you know, it will show you, validate what Jack's teaching you right now. So definitely a great thing to look at. So now this inside out, you know, kind of concave convex thing, are there any more pain points to not doing that?
If you're just using your arm or your shoulders, once again, you're going to cap out. You're not going to improve. And I can tell you, understanding these fundamentals, I started playing lefty in my 50s. And I'm 66 next week. And my left-handed game is probably as good as my right-handed game used to be in college. So, I mean, just by abiding by these principles, here's another product. I don't know if you've seen this one. You haven't seen this one live yet.
I've seen it. I have seen it on the videos, but I haven't seen it live yet. Yeah.
This is the Cobra, because I wanted people to stop thinking of a racket, right? They think of their racket as linear, right? It's flat. See that? But it's not. You watch Federer come into a forehand and he comes into it like that. And you can see he sort of rounds off his racket, lays back his wrist like that at contact. Why does he do that? And how can you make that perfect? I mean, if you just lay your wrist back, you're going to be sloppy as can be. But if you understand the 45 and this sine wave, you learn that the longer you stay behind the 45, the more this rounded bump here can meet the ball. And if you bring it across the 45, you're just going to hit the tip of it or miss it completely. So it really teaches you that you ripple and straddle behind, as you said earlier, behind that 45s. And once you get to the 45, you can't get to it because that's infinity and there's no such thing as getting to infinity. So once you get there, the stroke vanishes. And that's the follow through. That's the follow through people talk about.
Well, and I think one thing that shows up when you look at slow motion video of people as they swing is people don't realize that the racket is bending backwards.
That's right. That's right. Not a lot of people realize that you don't hit through the ball or directly towards the net. You actually bend your head backwards and it's going in this convex nature. It's actually going away from the ball and it's bumping the ball like that. And so you're really hitting it off of a bump as you go from concave to convex. And it's that bump that makes the ball go quick. And people always talk about this thing with the racket head speed the last 10 years and how fast the racket moves, but they don't realize that the racket actually moves slowly until the follow through, right? It goes out there slowly, look at Federer, and then all of a sudden it disappears. There's a different philosophy of hitting hard. You don't hit hard just by swinging fast, or else those cowboy punches, you know, the fights wouldn't last for 20 minutes on a cowboy movie, right? Because everyone's swinging fast, but they're standing up. In a real fight, they go through you and they have their body weight behind it, right? And what people need to understand is that there's a lot of pressure in the ball, right? You open a can of balls, there's a lot of pressure in the ball. It's very hard. And there's 40 to 50 to 60 pounds of pressure in your racket strings. And like you said, the racket head does slightly bend backwards when you make contact, right? Some rackets are more flexible than others. Some are stiffer. So when you merge with the ball and find the sweet spot of that ball, meaning press the most air into the ball, and your strings, you find the sweet spot of your strings in the same breath, you bend the strings further back and the racket head moves slightly, naturally, slightly back. When those three things merge, that is when you hear the big sound. And that is when you hit a quick ball. So even though Andy Roddick, I did a side-by-side once of them, you can find it on YouTube. Even though Roddick swung faster than Federer, he went from the outside, he loaded up, as they say, and they used him as an example. I never could figure out why. I never thought he had a good forehand, and then he'd come inside and be kind of off balance the whole way through. Federer's like this, and then he sort of sticks the ball out there with his hips moving, but his chest relatively neutral. But when Federer hits the ball, more air presses in, more strings bend back, and the head lays back. So his ball was always much bigger than Roddick's ball, even though Roddick used more energy, you know.
All right, what we really want to do is focus on efficiency. So in the next video, we're going to kind of put it all together and show why this teaching system will not only make the learner a lot more efficient and have these quantum improvements in their game, but it's also going to make a tennis coach a lot more valuable. You know, in my area, I am the most expensive lesson within a 10-mile radius and a very highly populated place. So that's a lot of people in that 10-mile radius, a lot of coaches in the surrounding area. People keep coming back. I teach principles that I've learned from Jack, and it's extremely valuable. It will add value to your game and to your teaching. We'll see you in the next clip.